Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dream City podcast, episode number 1, supported by Spotlight D.C. I'm your co-host, Cuneyt Dill.
And I'm Tom Sherwood.
Today, we talk about the uneasiness, the awkwardness, and the developing fallout from reports about a DOJ investigation. The saga involves a 2023 trip that Mayor Muriel Bowser and several aides took to Qatar to promote investment in the city. It was paid by Qatar, and now Mayor Bowser, while she is said to not be a part or a target of the investigation, questions still swirl about what this exactly means and how it might affect the mayor running potentially for a 4th term. Call it Qatargate.
Some people will call it Qatargate. I'm not.
You don't want to call it Qatar.
Go on with the program.
I was pausing because I knew you were. You don't want to call it Qatargate. We don't have to call it Qatargate.
Okay.
Plus,
it's a serious story, though.
It is a serious, not to make light of it. Plus, today we're going to talk about President Trump wants the new Commander Stadium named after him. He was at the football game versus the Lions on Sunday night. And we're going to talk about why another place far away wants to be the 51st state. And maybe they'll beat D.C. to becoming the 51st state. But before all that, let's talk about what we're doing today, Tom. This is a big day. We're launching this independent podcast, the Dream City podcast. It's named in homage to the 1994 book you wrote with Harry Jaffe about Marion Barry's Washington. And we're going to talk about DC politics here. We're going to talk about the business scene, try and go deep into the stories that we cover and bring our analysis and reporting. We'll have guests on. We already have some people who are very interested in coming on, I will say. But we've talked about this idea for a long time, and we wanted to do this episode on a weekend of big news in DC. But honestly, Tom, how the hell did I convince you to do this with me?
Yeah, I don't know, but I've looked at podcasts over time, but I think this one will be good for us. I do know there's an audience for what's precisely happening in the District of Columbia.
It's going to be huge. It's going to be huge, Tom.
And it's called Dream City in part, and we call the book Dream City because so many people come to the city. Many people move here. They don't just grow up here. And they have all kinds of ideas of how Washington, D.C. can be the symbol for you name it. And some dreams make it, some dreams don't.
And there's some optimism with the name, which I like. I mean, this is a tough time for the city right now, but I like the name Dream City.
Right.
Anyways, you're excited to go deep into some of the topics we're going to discuss. You've spent your whole life, basically. I mean, remind me again, all the resume items you have very quickly.
For me?
Yes.
It's like I tell interns who I talk to them, give me your life story in 30 seconds. I'll do it in 15. I'm from Atlanta. I worked for the Atlanta Constitution. I worked for 15 years at the Washington Post, a little over 28 at NBC4. And I've been the political analyst with Kojo Namdi on WAMU's Politics Hour since 2009.
And I'm Cuneyt Dill, so I'm a reporter for Axios D.C. You may have been reading my byline if you've wondered how to pronounce my name all this time. The C is like a J, so it's Cuneyt. But I'm really excited to do this. We have some exciting ideas for this podcast in the future. But for now, we're going to...
But you got to tell them you worked for the Northwest Current.
I did work for the Northwest Current. So in college, I went to AU, worked for the Northwest Current, if you still remember that paper. Freelanced for DC, as freelanced for Washington City paper. Started a newsletter called District Links because I was a maniac about DC politics in college. And, look, now we're here. So let's get to the lead. Yeah, let's get to the lead story. So we're going to talk about what is one of the most explosive stories in recent memory. What made this so bizarre in many ways was because no one saw any of this coming. The New York Times publishes on Thursday evening a bombshell that everyone, including you and people I know, sources, were texting around and saying, what is this about? The headline, I believe, was Mayor Muriel Bowser is under investigation about a foreign trip she took to Qatar.
In 2023.
In 2023. The sequence of that evening was that several hours later, I was able to report with Axios' star White House reporter Mark Caputo, who has some of the best sources in the Trump administration, we were able to report really he, found the reporting that Mayor Bowser is not the target of this investigation, that
Was
there
there some
might be
kind
a
of investigation?
yes,
That's it's still actually not specifically clear that there is any kind of ongoing investigation
right.
about anything. We just know that the administration through Axios, and I followed up with that, and I got some same kind of remarks
Yeah.
that Mayor
The Washington
Bowser is
Post confirmed it as well.
yes, and the Post did too. It was important. The Time story came out on Thursday, and it was more than 24 hours later before the Post reported anything. And they had 5 bylines on their story
That's right.
and basically said the mayor, what everyone else was saying by then. Now, the Times has followed up with its story. It hasn't corrected it, but it notes in its story, an updated version, that they have now reported that the administration is saying there is no investigation of the mayor, but they also went one step further and asked the administration, was there something going on at the time we did our story? And have things changed since we did our story, saying there was an investigation? And they
Basically,
got
was
a
the case closed in the
no
meantime?
comment from
No
the
comment.
administration.
Mhm.
So again, as you started the show, this opens up. Well, what the hell was it?
Right.
We don't know at this moment.
Is this a investigation about something that happened on that trip unrelated to the mayor? Is this a nothing burger? Was something closed? Was something leaked out as kind of a rumor that, there's a lot of uncertainty, but it's crazy timing because Bowser is considering whether to run for a fourth term.
That is why this is the most important thing. The politics of this, whether or not whether or not someone around her or somebody or some business or some in connection with Qatar has some issue that the feds are investigating, even though the mayor now is cleared by it. This is not a good thing. As we all been waiting for her to say whether she's going to run or not for a fourth term, and that certainly gets her opponents, potential opponents, excited that this is a speed bump for her.
And it's worth saying, it's not illegal for foreign entities, governments to take politicians on trips necessarily. There are processes to report them, ethics disclosures. I've reported on foreign trips in California when I was a AP reporter there. These things happen a lot, and the city governments can make the case for why they need to go abroad and talk to
Well,
investors all the time. This,
that's true, and the mayor's
yeah,
acknowledged that her administration was not good at the filing of
yes,
proper papers. They
there were
filed them
shifting
many
explanations.
months later.
Yes, I
Eh,
can briefly run through it. In 2023, they took this trip. This was actually a trip to Dubai. This was a Middle East trip that included a UN climate conference in Dubai that was funded by, I believe, the Bloomberg Group that was putting the trip on. But they went to Qatar before flying out to
The
Dubai.
mayor and 4 aides.
Mhm. And Qatar paid more than $61,000 for that trip, according to Qatari officials. Um, this was originally reported by ABC 7, and there were conflicting, shifting answers about who first picked up the tab. Initially, the Bowser administration said it was the DC Chamber of Commerce. Then they said it was the US Conference of Mayors. Turns out they only paid for the Dubai trip. And finally, it was revealed that Qatar paid for it. Now, Bowser defended going on the trip, and I'm going to try and play a soundbite from Friday.
Years, a business trip, a publicly noticed trip to promote Washington, D.C. in Qatar. That's what we did. And we don't have any bones about
And let me just play Tom. She said she was not under investigation.
I am not under investigation. I have not been contacted by any federal officials about investigating me.
Well,
Mm,
it's important that she says she's not a target of the investigation. That's been said now by officials. But the fact that she hasn't been contacted doesn't matter. Every lawyer I know in town says if you're being investigated, they don't come to you until they have all the information to confront you with it. They don't just say, hey, did you do something wrong? So that's where we are.
That's where we are. And what's next is, the reason we're posting this now. We're actually recording this late on a Sunday because we were so worried that some news might break that could overtake this podcast before we posted it. Um, so everyone's waiting in city politics right now to see what will exactly happen next.
Particularly the people who are planning at this moment to run in 2026. You
Yes.
pick up petitions to run for the mayor or any other seats in January. We're just a couple of months away from campaigns officially getting underway. And I'll let you take it with Janeese Lewis George. And what's the latest with her, the
Well,
Ward 4
yeah,
council member?
and I'll just zoom out for a minute. This could be the craziest election year ever in recent memory, at least in DC. We could get a new mayor. We could get a new delegate to Congress. We could get new council members. We could have all an array of shifts on the council and other positions, depending on who runs and who wins or who has to resign for what seat. That's something we want to talk about in the weeks ahead. But first and foremost, we also have to mention the big victory in New York City of Zohran Mamdani. There is a Zohran Mamdani in D.C. who could run for mayor. I'm talking about Ward 4 council member Janeese Lewis George. She represents a diverse ward all the way from Petworth up to Tacoma. Part of Chevy Chase, D.C. is part of Ward 4 up 16th Street. She's a democratic socialist. She's a young person. She is someone who could play that same blueprint, that
Tune.
tune, yeah, preaching affordability. And look, progressives are eager now to take on the city's business establishment. They're eager to challenge Bowser's cautious approach to President Trump. And I'll go through her record a little bit here. I wrote a little story in Axios about it. But, Lewis George has rallied against the federal takeover. She's gone to free DC protests. She's denounced ICE enforcement. In fact, she took a video of an apparent immigration detainment in August. Um, she did vote for the RFK Stadium project, the $3.7 billion redevelopment, after guarantees for more union jobs. That was kind of interesting because you looked at the criticism for that project was coming from the left. She ended up, I guess, winning herself over on that project after some more union jobs were added. And this is the kind of sort of, um, laboratory, if you will, uh, progressive legislating that she has tried to do as a DC council member. This did not pass, I will say, but she has proposed things like the Green New Deal for housing. She proposed this social housing concept where DC government would build mixed use, mixed income, affordable apartments in the city, a European model. This is a flavor of the kind of campaign she could run. And I am told that she is making phone calls to potential supporters and vendors in anticipation of launching a campaign for mayor in the weeks and months to come.
Yeah, and she's in her second term. She got reelected easily from Ward 4. So she could run for mayor without giving up her Ward 4 seat. That's very important politically. Also, the mayor's administration says she's running. The mayor's
Mm.
people say she's running. We expect her to run. She's going to be on the ballot. She's going to take petitions out in January.
Oh, that's interesting
And
that they say she's running.
yes, they believe that. So maybe something will change for Janeese Lewis George. She's a new mother. I think her child is somewhere around a year old. Running in Ward 4 is one thing. Running day in and day out around the entire District of Columbia is something for her and her family to consider. But she has a message, just as you laid out, a progressive message that's much more progressive than Mayor Muriel Bowser, who's more of a moderate progressive.
That's right. And she beat the mayor's political apparatus to win her seat. Was it
Yes, she did.
2020
In
she
the first
won?
time, yes, the first
That's
time,
right.
and she ran
Yeah.
virtually unopposed for the second term.
She
So
beat
she's prepared.
a
We're just
ally of
waiting.
the mayor to take the seat.
Yes. So we're waiting to see when she picks up petitions and what kind of news she makes with that and what her campaign's going to be. The mayor, if she runs, we don't know if she's going to run or not, but her developing theme for the Mayor Bowser is promises made, promises kept.
Okay. Before we go to
Football.
another candidate, you remember the New York Times needle on election night, the needle that went all over the place depending on who they thought was gonna win the election. If you had a needle for is Mayor Bowser gonna run or not, is it pointing 60% Mayor Bowser will run for reelection or 60% she will not run for reelection, or where are you?
As I told someone the other day, I'm like a weather vane on this spinning in a storm. All summer long, I thought she definitely was going to run. For a couple of weeks there, hearing from a whole bunch of people who she's been talking to, sounds like she wasn't going to run. She was going out in the private sector, walk away with 3 terms in office, spend more time with Miranda, her young daughter, build a personal life, maybe make money. But in the last couple of weeks, I have now the weather vane is turned back around. I would say 55, 60% she's going to run.
Mm.
One thing I heard, which I had not discussed even on our radio show, is the NFL came to the District of Columbia. They signed a deal with Mayor Muriel Bowser to build that stadium at RFK. I don't think the business people around that deal want her to walk away from it. She's announced it. They signed the deal. The council has approved it. But there's all kinds of steps going between now and the time the ribbon is cutting and they play football at RFK. And I think they want the mayor to be right there with them.
Are you saying the NFL is concerned if Mayor Bowser isn't in office that that deal could get derailed in some way?
It wouldn't be derailed, but it would change if they're going to sit down and talk about how quickly the housing is going to be built and who's going to do the hotels and changes that might be made in the deal that's been reached and signed. There are always changes and things happen. Do they want to discuss this with Mayor Bowser with all her experience, or do they want Janeese Lewis George, who would more likely than not put much more pressure on the team to maybe do more for the city, do more for the people in Wards 7 and 5 and 6? That's a real issue. And there are
Mm.
lots of business people in town who recognize that Mayor Bowser has a right to not run for a 4th term, really don't want her to leave yet.
One of the things is we don't talk about maybe enough is the personal decisions people in politics have to consider when running.
Yes.
You have a
That's why I
young
mentioned her
child, you have a
daughter.
family, you have you know, even the fact that politicians don't make that much money compared to the private sector.
Right.
There are a lot of personal decisions that have to be made for these people.
You cover politicians, and I tell this to journalism students when I talk to them. If you want to go into politics coverage as a journalist and you think all politicians are out for themselves, they're all essentially crooks whenever they can be, you should get another job. These are, in fact, human beings. They have ideas of how they want things to do and how things should go. And they have families. They're human beings. They're on call 24/7. I'll admit all my years as a TV reporter and post reporter, people would say, Sherwood, you ought to run for mayor. You know all this stuff. You've been around. And I said, you guys have no idea what I think about these X number of issues. And I said, "No, but I know that I cover politicians who are human beings and politicians second."
This podcast is not sponsored by the Tom Sherwood for at-large council member campaign.
No, it
This
isn't.
is
Good
not this is
spotlight.
not no advertising here. Okay, let's talk about another candidate, Kenyon McDuffie. Kenyon McDuffie is the at-large council member. He went around town telling people that basically he was going to run for mayor. I believe this was 2 weeks ago. I reported this, and
Yeah,
we
see,
haven't we
and
haven't
people
heard so
close to
much
him
since
were
then.
also calling around reporters saying that this was going to happen.
And so, what are your sources saying now, Tom? Is Kenyon gonna get in?
Well, I was told that Kenyon is going to run whether the mayor does or not, but I don't. I will be surprised if that's true. If Mayor Bowser gets in, that she takes the middle ground, the middle progressive ground that Kenyon operates in.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure what his issues with her would be. Um, they're pretty close together on crime and the football stadium and economic development, which is what Kenyon has been doing in his council seat.
Yeah,
So
Councilmember McDuffie is the chair of the Business and Economic Development Committee.
that's correct. So he's worked closely with the mayor on a variety of things. If she does not run, he would want to pick up the flag, the baton, whatever track meet thing you can think of, and run. And that would be bigger for him. It's a much better chance if he were to do that. than if he were to run in a three-way race with Janeese Lewis George, the mayor, and Kenyon. That would almost, I think, assure the mayor of winning.
When do you think this race is actually going to get going? Because the Democratic primary is in June.
Yes, it is. You can pick up the petitions in January. Then you have to collect, if you run a public interest campaign, you pick up petitions to get your name on the ballot and start collecting money. That's how in January will be the starting gate. That's where everybody will say, I'm running. If Kenyon McDuffie gets in, it would just be stunning. He's supposed to run for reelection in 26. If he runs for mayor and loses, he'll be out of a job.
Right. I mean, for arcane reasons, he's an independent council member for at large.
Yeah.
Means he's citywide, but he would have to resign his seat, most likely, because he needs to run in the Democratic primary for mayor. To run in the
Yes, that
Democratic
was,
primary for mayor, you have to be a Democrat, obviously, but he's an independent. You can't be
and
you can't be a Democrat and have the seat he currently
that's because
has.
of the arcane rules about council members set up so there'd be not just Democrats on the council.
Right.
But if Kenyon McDuffie steps down from his council seat, resigns the seat, it's a $175,000 a year job,
Mm-hmm.
and he has kids in school. His wife has a job, but he's a major breadwinner for his family. If he says, well, I'm going to step down and I'm going to run in the Democratic primary, that is a hell of a commitment for him to make as a family
Yeah.
person.
He would be all
And
in. Yeah.
yes, it would be all in.
And I mean, so just like we said, those are the personal considerations
One more
people have to
thing.
make in these,
One more thing. I have been told by two separate people who I'm sure talk to
Oh,
each
you
other,
have some
but
news. Okay.
yeah, that say, don't rule out a surprise candidate from the business community who will
Oh boy.
spring upon the scene in January.
A surprise business community person.
Not somebody representing the business community, because that sounds too narrow, but someone who's in the business community who thinks they can run a campaign for mayor. I'm only saying it here on this podcast. I can't report it because I don't know enough about it, but there's a little something bubbling in the background.
Hmm. Well, I wrote a whole column about how the CEO of Metro, Randy Clark, should run for
Not sure
mayor.
he liked that
This
story.
was a hypothetical story, but the idea, the thought experiment, if you will, was that could a technocrat, someone who is focused on the nuts and bolts of getting something running efficiently and turning around a complex organization,
You're talking
run
about
for
Randy Clark. You hadn't
Randy
said his
Clark,
name.
yeah, run for mayor. So, but anyways, we're gonna have a crazy election year. We're all just kind of waiting. But someone who's not waiting for the Commander Stadium to open yet is President Trump. He wants the Commanders to name their domed stadium at RFK after him. This is a report from ESPN, multiple sources telling ESPN that there have been some sort of back channel communications from the White House with the Commanders Group about this thing that Trump wants. He wants the stadium named after him.
I'm going to treat this with all the severity that it deserves. He was booed Sunday night at the Lions game.
That's
There were
right.
some cheers. Trump is, his ego is such that he wants, look at how he's done the White House and all the things he's doing. He's put himself in charge of the L.A. Olympics. He says he would oversee the Gaza redevelopment. He's taken over the Kennedy Center.
Well, yeah,
So,
look no further than Kennedy Center. He wants to
all right,
build the Arc de Trump across the river and what is it, Memorial Bridge, just across
over another
Memorial
side of
Bridge.
Memorial Bridge. Yes, he wants to do all those things. And so here's the deal. Trump is only going to be in office for 3 more years. And the stadium's not going to open until 2030. And so Trump will be out of office. So I don't think this team is going to name it after Trump because they can get a fortune for naming rights, selling it to commercial people. Right now, the Northwest Stadium in Landover, Maryland, the Northwest Credit Union paid $72 million for 8 years to have their name on that stadium. And so if you put Trump's name on it, you won't get a dime. So
Yeah,
that's not going to happen.
that's true. The sports teams want the branding, sponsorship money that comes
Yes.
from these stadiums.
Some people thought the city should have negotiated that with the team that they would share in the naming rights. And some people just want it to be RFK again. It's been RFK since the late 60s.
Well, I
So
will
why not just keep it RFK? But the team has the legal right to have the name whatever they want.
well,
And
I
they're
will
going to,
say
whoever gets it will pay
the
big bucks.
the main owner of the Commanders, the lead partner of the Commanders ownership group, Josh Harris, has a relationship with the president. I don't know how close they
He's
are. I
not
don't
going to name
know
the
how
stadium.
friendly they are. No, that's yeah. But it is something I'm curious to understand more about how far their ties go back. Because Josh Harris was at one of the Middle East events that Trump had, I believe, a few months ago about investment,
I'll just
and
say this:
they do float in the same sort of world.
it's a transactional situation. Josh Harris's life is totally different from in the billionaire world than what Trump's is, and I believe anything that Josh Harris does that any way nods in the direction of Trump is because they want Trump to stay out of their business. You know, a couple of years ago, President Trump said that the team ought to be renamed the old name, the
That's right.
racist
Yeah,
name.
he said
And
right.
that didn't go anywhere. And I think I can put the naming of the stadium in that same
Well,
basket.
could this be his negotiating position?
No.
He's gonna come down from, "I want the stadium to be named after me," to, "Well, you're gonna have to change the name if you of the team if you want the team to come back."
Well, here's the back door to what could make Trump this more serious than I think it sounds. The district the land, the federal land where the stadium is, 188 acres, was transferred from the Park Service, the Interior Department, to the District of Columbia government in December of last year, before Trump took office. And so the federal government signed documents saying, here, you get the land, for, I think it's 99-year lease, you can develop it. But the city didn't buy the land. And so therefore, there might be some sentence, some paragraph, some footnote in the agreement that Trump could seize upon and say,
Mhm.
hey, I want to hold this stadium up,
He
because
could
of
have
X, Y, or
leverage.
Z.
That's right, yeah,
It's not clear what's going to happen because anything, as we've seen, anything can happen with Trump.
and we're gonna have to see what happens.
That's what he
And
says all the time. Let's
well,
see what
that's what
happens.
we're gonna see what happens in 2 weeks. Um, Tom, you found this story online that I was interested in. So there's another push for a 51st state, not in D.C., quite far away. Can you tell what is this about?
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal just popped up a story the other day, and I thought, my God, what is that? And it's that the Guam. And Guam, just so you'll know, is 1,500 miles east of the Philippines in the Pacific Ocean. Um, Guam wants to be the 51st state. Now, not Guam itself, but there are business people there and people who live there. There's only 170,000 people in Guam. It's a little tiny place. It's basically a military base for the United States and its battles, political battles with China in the east.
Yeah, it
But
says U.S. competition with China intensifies. This is the Wall Street Journal. The Pentagon's building up Guam. They're building more of a presence there.
the United States has been in charge of took control of Guam in 1898. So we've had it for a while, and it's a territory, and they're U.S. citizens. But this has come as a horror from people who support D.C. statehood, the 51st state, D.C., D.C., D.C.,
Right. D.C. is
and
supposed to
then
be
for
the
Guam
51st state
out in
for
the middle of
supporters.
somewhere to say, well, we want to be the 51st state. And of course, Puerto Rico has talked about being the state. President Trump has talked about, sorry, shouldn't laugh, making Greenland or Canada the
Canada?
51st state.
Right.
So this is the kind of the wacky world we're in right now. But there will be maybe a referendum in Guam for them to start seeking statehood. And maybe some people laughed in 1959 when Alaska became a state. Hawaii was out in the middle of the Pacific. Alaska was way up north, and they became states. So maybe it will happen.
Tom, my friend, you are old enough to remember when Alaska became a state, right?
I will tell you that I was living in Hawaii in 1959 when it became a
Oh,
state, and
I
I
didn't
went
know
to the
that. You were
statehood
living in Hawaii?
celebration. Yes.
When did you live in Hawaii?
I was a child. I was a smart child, but I was a child, and
Mhm.
my stepfather was in the Army, and we were stationed in Hawaii when it
Wow,
became a state,
that's amazing.
and
Wow.
I saw Elvis Presley live there in 1957. I think that's a good way to end this podcast.
Yes, thank you.
It's
The other
starting to
thing
go
we
off in a direction.
well, no, it's a good direction. One thing we do need is an intro and outro song. I wanted to sample, like, Aerosmith's "Dream On" or "Dreams" by Fleetwood Mac, but I don't wanna get sued either, so I don't think we're gonna do that.
Well, if you
But
do
if
it just as
anyone
a
has
little,
any ideas,
let's check with a lawyer
let's
because
check
if
with
you
a lawyer.
well, because if you use a little bit of it just as
A little
there are rights
tease.
depending on what you use.
Okay, some lawyers maybe email us. But folks, before we sign off, I want to give a thanks to our launch sponsor, Spotlight DC, the Capital City Fund for Investigative Journalism. Spotlight DC is supporting us with a launch grant. Thanks to them, we were able to buy some fancy microphones and everything, get this show up and running. But follow us at dreamcity.news. Subscribe to get notified about this podcast, and we're going to have some future updates, so stay tuned about that. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Cuneyt, signing off now.
Tom Sherwood, thanks for listening.
Dream on. Have a great week.